You ready?
I'm ready, sir.
Okay, smile. Okay, awesome.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I like to limber up. Okay, let me make sure I'm
Get
not
the,
holding my paper.
get the drama
Limber up. Come
classes.
on, get it. Woo! Get jazz. Here we go. Eden, just be spiritual boom. Not just boom, but bam, heading you towards the Great Awakening, now on audio and video. And I have Brandon here today. I'm going to do a little bit more talking in a moment, but I would love for him to just say, hey, y'all, because he's down south in Florida now. So you can say, hey, y'all.
Hey, y'all. How you doing there?
Even though he's from California. Quickly, before we get into more stuff, on my last podcast, I talk about being permanently suspended from Twitter. So my last episode was specifically asking people to go on, stand up for me, or just stand up as, and asking Twitter, are they really about free speech? Are they? And one of my people that I've just met, she's been banned off of it, but she talked about it getting better. So I today just made an account with my daughter. So I will be utilizing that. And not only am I emailing them every day about my suspension, when I'm on with my daughter, I'm gonna be posting big time.
I
All
would
right.
imagine that
Yes.
I would imagine that Elon is gonna in time you'll be reinstated. I think.
I would think so. I would think so. But
He
until then,
he can't get it all done in one day. They still have a lot of moles in that place, I think.
yes, and a lot of bots and all that. So yeah, I'm just gonna keep nudging along. Well, I am here with Brandon Wainwright, who how old are you for the people that can't see you?
I am
Not that it matters, but
49. That's
okay.
yeah, 49 and a half. Very basically right at that point. Yeah, 49 and a half. Be 50
Oh
in June.
my gosh. Beautiful.
Mhm.
We today are going to be going in, as I typically do, to the Great Awakening and the spiritual aspect. When we first spoke, Brandon knew of it, let's say, from a political venue. And unfortunately, and fortunately, it involves everything. All of this is spiritual, even though it doesn't seem like it is. So, since our meeting even become, let's say, becoming more invested in that, is that okay to say, Brandon? Would you agree?
Yeah, I'd say
Okay.
so. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, really, really. So, we're going to talk today about he went from being a policeman, also went in college. He studied film, so he tried that in California. He's from California, to toting water bottles or replacing water for 5 years. Is that right? Did I get the 5 years correct?
Yeah, a little over 5 years,
A
but
little over 5 years.
yep.
So he then went into a spiritual awakening brought on by the death of his 8-pound dog, Tyson, given a brain tumor. And his book right now is Tyson's Gift, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And everything spawned from that. He is now a Reiki Master, a level II Animal Reiki Practitioner, a certified color and sound energy healer, Kundalini Light Energization, and Spirit Assisted Energy Healer. Look at that. He also has his own podcast that I will be on in February, which really attempts to show that the paranormal is normal. And through this great awakening, there are going to be lots of discoveries on that. So I want to start in just a second talking about him being a police officer in the San Francisco Bay Area in December 2021. He and his wife and daughter, 2 dogs, and chinchilla moved to Tallahassee, Florida, because they saw their rights being taken away, lawlessness, you also being a white male, and we'll talk some about that. And let me preface this too. The Brain and I had already recorded this podcast. We went into 2 hours, and towards the end of it, I was like, with your police and everything that you had been seeing, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. And my goal is to bring spiritual people on this show and basically go and have, because there are so many spiritual people that do not understand the gravity and the extent of this vibration and how it is going to be impacting everything, down to our politics, down to our finances, down to education, all of it. So my job also is to get the word out to everyone, and then really hone in on these Reiki practitioners and shamans, and that we're so important during this time as well. So with that, one more thing, Nyla Newing is going to be my guest next week. So we're going to go into the Galactic Federation and really go into the spiritual side of this all. So open your mind, open your mind, open your mind. Brandon, shall we start with your policing? Is that a good place to begin this time? Your policing.
Sure.
Tell us about that. What did you know? And this was before Tyson had passed. Or no,
Well, yeah,
during because when did
he
Tyson
died.
was
He died.
2018.
Yeah, he died a couple of years before
Okay.
the end of my career. But yeah, I started off as a law enforcement ranger with California State Parks.
Mhm.
And then I was with them for about 5 years total, and then I moved over to East Bay Regional Parks. I really liked working in parks, and it was good for me. But East Bay Regional Parks is the largest regional park system in the country, covers Alameda and Contra Costa County out there in California. So it's a huge park district. I think it's 70, I want to say 73 parks in the system.
Ooh.
That was just huge. And it's a really, really great. It's the resources within it are fantastic. Anybody in the Bay Area right now probably would shake their head and agree. Yeah. Or nod their head. So that was the environment I was working in, but it being that it was so big, a lot of it was urban interface. So there were parks in Oakland and Richmond and, in the rougher areas, but then there were also parks in the more affluent areas. It was a huge demographic spectrum that I patrolled. And so I had contact with people from all walks of life and socioeconomic backgrounds and race and you name it. So it was definitely, I really got to see, to have a actual firsthand experience with all the different stuff that was going on in the Bay Area. San Francisco is on a whole other level, but actually that's not true. There's in the East Bay, Berkeley, and in Oakland, they had very similar types of problems there in this San Francisco, but definitely if an interesting place to work, to say the least, and a frustrating one too.
Okay. And during all of that, from you living there, how were lockdowns handled? How was the pandemic handled there? Because I know it's very rigid, and you were in it though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was, initially it was just like everybody else, 2 weeks, we're going to be locked down. And initially it was just, and I never locked down because of what I did for a living. So,
Mhm.
we weren't, we had to keep working. Just, we didn't stop at all, which in the beginning was kind of nerve wracking, to be honest. I remember I was like, I couldn't wait to get home from my shift, because I felt like I was out there at risk, and yeah, because I mean, we were believing what we were being told. It's like, well, they wouldn't be doing this if it was, if there wasn't a good reason to do it. And if there's a good reason to do it, this must be pretty gnarly. And I'm out here interacting with it. But in the beginning, yeah, there was no mask requirements. And actually, the park district I worked for, there were a lot of park systems around the country that shut down, but the one I worked for kept everything open and actually encouraged people to come to the park and recreate.
Oh my gosh.
Which
That's
a lot
fabulous.
of the officers were ticked off, though, because it was like,
Oh.
wait a minute, if this is that bad, why are you keeping these things open where people can interact and putting all of us at risk in the process?
Mhm.
Which I think that was a legitimate gripe,
Mhm.
with given what we knew at the time.
Exactly. Mhm.
And then, of course, it turned out that all that, there really wasn't, in my opinion. COVID ended up being, like you said, a pandemic, and it was all a bunch of crap. But
So when did you start to question that, or realize at first going out, I'm kind of fearful because I'm out in the public and I've been told that this is really dangerous and horrible. And so what started changing for you? What
Then,
opened your
right then
eyes?
and right then and there, it's like, right, the way they were handling it didn't make sense to me, because if it really was
Ah,
a pandemic, why would you be taking that risk? I mean, yeah, I love the idea of getting people out in the sunshine and fresh air and keep moving for their mental health. But if this is really what you're saying it is, unfortunately, that's not that shouldn't, I wouldn't think, be an option. And they're saying, well, if you're out not indoors, then it's not, the risk is minimized, but it's still there. Why would you do anything to increase it? And then, they're saying, well, that was what the Department of Health recommended, which that's probably true as far as from the district standpoint. I
mhm.
wasn't in the meetings or anything like that, but it definitely didn't make sense to me. And then, me being an officer, I was patrolling around, and they didn't want people congregating, so they had like the picnic areas taped off, and which it makes sense. But they also told us to, if you see it, ask people to disperse, and if they refuse, don't enforce it. Which also told me, no, that doesn't make sense. If it's really this dangerous, we should be enforcing it. If I mean, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not into the police state. I'm not saying that we should be all officious and taking away everybody's rights and freedoms, but if it really is that dire, you know, you should definitely be enforcing it. And I got, early on, I got pushed back from, it's so funny because in actually it was a park in Berkeley, and how they are as far as they want big government, they want all that stuff. But man, when you ask them to disperse, boy, did they get upset.
Whoa.
I mean, some of the people and I was like, you know what? No, I'm not putting myself in this position. If I have no ability to enforce it, I'm not, even going to ask them. You know what? It's on them. And I know that my department probably wouldn't want to hear that I took that stance, but I think very quickly we all did, because it was like, what's the point?
Well, I have a
It,
client who's a midwife as well, and she was told at some point that all mothers coming in who are pregnant to offer
Just
them the
be
vaccination.
practice.
And she was like, I can't do that. So she stopped. Like, oh, you
good.
have to offer this and you have, and she's like, heck no, I'm not going to do it. And I was like, just don't, because no one's in the room with you. Why would that? She's like, oh yeah. I'm like, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was it. I mean, fortunately, police officers have discretion,
Nice.
but it definitely didn't make sense. It seemed like an odd dichotomy of
Yeah.
policy. Um, and then I'll just give you an example. As it progressed, like one of our parks in Alameda has a big beach,
Hmm.
and I can remember they had all the picnic areas taped off, but people on the beach were all congregating. And it's like, this doesn't add up. This doesn't make any sense that you're allowing this. Don't get me wrong. At that point, I was pretty sure that it was a bunch of crap. That not that COVID wasn't real, but
Right.
that the way they were making it out, definitely there was a lot missing from what they were telling us, and so I was actually glad that these people were able to go out on the beach and recreate. But it also disgusted me that the district was talking about both sides of their ass,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you will. Um, and so those sorts of things just really ticked me off. And then, also California, there were the lockdowns. I remember the end of 2020, they the lockdown started, right from the beginning, when it was in February or March. And I thought, and they were saying, oh, this could go till the end of the school year. And I remember thinking, what? That's insane. Why would it go all the way to the end of the school year? And sure enough, it did. And then I think it went like through most of the summer. And then they released it for like a month or two, maybe a
Hmm.
month and a half. And the numbers didn't change. It had zero impact. It really did. And by the way, Florida, I can't actually quote you numbers, but I do know that statistically, Florida and California have about the same, you know The numbers are very similar, and so it just goes to show you all that damage they did in California was for nothing. Thing is, we knew it while they were doing it, and they did it anyway. They knew it too. I believe that firmly. And
So
then
how
I
did
can,
how did you continue with your work? Like again, it's up to your discretion. So you decided, hey, I'm not going to try and enforce this. I'm not, because I know you said that too, that it became hard to really enforce anything.
yeah, well, can I finish one quick thing
Yeah,
before I,
sure.
so after, the lockdown, they released the lockdown, but then Christmas rolls around.
Okay.
And I can remember my wife and I went out for dinner on a Saturday night, and I had, I guess I wasn't paying much attention to the news, certainly not what Gavin Newsom said.
And he's the
eh,
governor, correct?
yeah, Greasy
Yeah.
Gavin. Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Um,
Okay.
that's my nickname for him. Uh, so they decided that I think it was on the Sunday. This was early December. They were gonna re-implement the lockdowns, and so it was so bad. It was so dire in California. The numbers were spiking so very badly that they decided that they were going to give a 2 or 3 day or whatever cushion before they had a lockdown. Does that make any sense?
No.
No. If it's that bad, you're going to do it immediately. And I remember it was so sad to me because the restaurant we were at, we told the server, because actually we found out while we were at dinner, because we just weren't paying attention, I guess, that they were going to lie. And we said, so sorry that this is happening again. And the guy almost started crying. I mean, you could see he was
Oh,
holding back. He was so frustrated and just upset. And these restaurants were spending a lot of money on new infrastructure so that they could have outdoor dining, heaters and umbrellas or tents and stuff. I mean, tens of thousands of dollars were being spent to make it so that they could still survive. And then no sooner did they do that, spend all that money, that they locked them down again. So anyway, that was another clue. Not that I needed one at that point, but it was like, what is the point? And mind you, most of the country wasn't doing that at this point. Most of the country they were moving forward with themselves, and they were doing just fine. I mean, not that there weren't still problems, but the lockdown wasn't having any
right.
impact, but they're doing it anyway. And that's the thing. It's like, okay, look, lockdowns, obviously they don't, it didn't work. And we took herd immunity. It was much harder to get herd immunity, and it caused so much damage. But in the midst of it, as it was causing all this damage and as it was not yielding the results that they wanted, they did it anyway. Anybody with any common sense, I'm sorry, well, let me put it this way. Anybody that's using their common sense and isn't blinded by their fear and their political affiliation is going to see that there's ulterior motives involved here. I'm sorry. And so that was where that's my statement on that. So as far as policing was concerned, I mean, that as far as COVID versus the other laws that we enforce out there, that was just an example. Ultimately, it's whatever way the political wind is blowing is what they're going to go along with. It isn't principled like it used to be. I mean, as far as property crimes are concerned, I mean, there is no consequences anymore. Okay, I'll give you an example, like with the drug laws. One of my jobs, especially when I was on the dirt bike, was enforcing leash laws for dogs.
Ooh, ooh.
And which was not, that sounds like petty and easy. That is the hardest enforcement that I
I
did.
would kind of believe it. Oh
Uh,
man. All right.
people, they hated you. I mean, you think it's bad pulling somebody over and for a speed? Oh no, that's easy. Believe me. And I did that too, but that's easy compared to dog off leash enforcement. It really is. And it does, it's important. It's not that it's not an important, these ordinances aren't important to enforce, especially in that department has all kinds of area for them to be off, by the way. So, but there are places where for resource reasons and such, safety reasons, where they want them on. So that was something I had to do a lot of. But the consequences that you would receive for having a dog off leash because I mean, you'd pay a fine. It would go through traffic court. You'd pay a fine, and and the fine, it wasn't cheap. Part of that's because it's the Bay Area and it's very expensive there, and they have uh, fines that go along with that. But if I caught somebody, because they knocked all the drug laws down, and California's not the only one, I don't think. I think Washington might have done the same thing in Oregon. But they knocked all the major drug laws down to misdemeanors and from
What were they
felonies.
before? Or from felonies?
Felonies. In 2014, they did that. And Jerry Brown, Governor Moonbeam, he was a big advocate for that. And and the way they sold it was, well, it's not fair for these people that simply have a drug problem to have to go and spend all this time in jail, which on a fundamental level, I agree
Yeah,
with
that makes
them on
sense.
that. You don't take somebody with a chemical problem and incarcerate them and make them have even more problems, because that does happen a lot.
Yep.
And they would say, like, marijuana, like, you've got people who've been 20 years for a little marijuana. Obama, I think, would say that. And I agree with that too. But the reality of it was that for simple possession, not dealing, not trafficking, but for simple possession, yeah, it was classified as a felony, but they didn't generally get charged as a felony. In fact, I don't know. In my career, I don't know of any cases where they got charged as a felony up to that point, unless there was, well, even there. But usually, if they went to jail in a situation like that, there was a lot of other charges as well.
Right.
That wasn't the only one, but they'll spin it any way they can to sell, right? So what would happen is, like, usually it would be like 5 repeat offenses before they would actually charge them with the felony. And in that process, they would, they get probation. It would start off like no probation, no jail time. You have to go to rehab, and trying to actually give them incentives to help themselves.
Okay, so there was a process, even though, I mean, it sounded like it worked well, or it tried to really help the person. Let's put it that way. Before
it tried
the hammer came down.
Yeah, absolutely, and it provided a deterrent as well. And again, I'm not, I've drugs. I've had plenty of family members that have had drug problems, and I'm empathetic with that situation, and I certainly don't want people that are struggling with that to have their lives made even worse. But there is a society we have to think about. You have to have guidelines. You have to have rules and consequences to things. Otherwise, it just
like raising kids. Like, if you let your
exactly.
kids do whatever, it means it's kind of the same concept.
Yeah,
Like,
and I'm not again, I'm not a big police state guy at all. I'm not like into taking people's rights, but there's common sense things.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what the net effect of that was, for people that think that California is all the homelessness is because of the cost of living, that is, a lot of people say that and think that. Okay. What happened immediately, I can remember when it passed, my fellow officers and I were like, oh no.
Oh, wow.
This is going to be a big problem.
Okay.
And it turned out to be right. But what happened was, so the district attorney and their office has limited resources, right? I mean, they only have so many deputy DAs with only so much time in the day versus the number of cases that they get. So they have to triage, obviously, right? So if it's a felony and you get you get it, you have a case, let's say possession of meth or cocaine or heroin or something like that. It's a felony. So are you going to tie up an actual trial with all the resources, all the personnel needed for that? Probably not, but you can plead it down. You can plead it down to a misdemeanor, and you can get the people rehab, and you can actually give them consequences for that act, and give them incentive to get on the right track, within the scope of the resources that the DA has available to them, right? Well, once they made it a misdemeanor, there was no plea bargaining leverage.
Oh, man.
Right. I mean, and so what ends up happening now, and what's still going on there, is they just don't charge it. When I would get, so I had many cases where, and I did, like in the parks, we had all the same crimes and everything as you do in a city, but the cases that I had, the vast majority of them, and maybe even all of them, after once that law was passed, they would come back, dismissal for lack of evidence. That was what they would say. There was evidence. They just said lack of it. That was their catch-all, and they just wouldn't charge it. They just wouldn't charge it because they don't, and you can understand why. They don't have the resources. They have bigger fish to fry than that. But the net effect is that people can now, it's legal for them to go out there and do all the drugs they want. I mean, that is the net effect. And we were at, the other thing is when it became just a misdemeanor, they just got a ticket. They weren't arrested anymore. So there's literally no deterrent. They don't even go to jail and get bailed out or anything. Nothing.
How much are the tickets typically?
They're criminal tickets, so they actually still have to get charged.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. So most of them probably didn't even get the ticket. They got a ticket, but they didn't have to pay it.
Yeah. Oh,
Am
no.
I saying that right?
Yeah. No, and that's where literally in the parks, if you got caught, if I caught you with, if I caught Joe Schmo or some old, some old lady walking with her poodle or her chihuahua down the trail with the dog off leash, if I wrote her a ticket,
Oh my gosh,
she would have significantly more consequences than the guy that I caught with meth 50 feet down the trail.
what an awesome comparison. I have to sit with this for a second. Holy smokes.
That's reality. That's absolute reality.
So would you say that's why there's a big homelessness contingency in the state right now because of this?
That's a huge part of it. Yeah, because there's no deterrent there. And then you have all these people that are coming in from the rest of the country. I mean, the population of homeless in California, I can't remember what the percentage is, but it's a massive percentage of the overall population in the country. And it became a magnet starting in 2014, probably even before that, because it still wasn't as strict even before that as it was in a lot of the country. But so you don't have any deterrent for the drugs. Well, so you get these people that have a problem. Where I was at, meth was the biggest problem, and that is just like it's cancer for the brain. And cancer, I mean, it's awful to see people that are addicted to meth. These people are suffering so badly. But so they come, and they're hooked. They don't want help. They don't want to go to rehab. They just want they want their next fix. That's they're ill, and so how do they do that? Well, a lot of them steal things, right? Steal property crimes to pay for that. And so so the drug issue drives up the property crime. And that in the Bay Area, California I believe it's the worst property crime rate in the country. And that has a lot to do with it. So
can you do anything with property crime right now too? Or is that kind of,
it's basically the same thing. I mean, it's not like, well, I mean, what happens is the cutoff for felony versus misdemeanor in California is $950. So what, like in San Francisco, what that brilliant DA said, the one that got recalled just recently, Chesa Bodine or something, I think his name is, what he said is, I'm not charging any misdemeanor property crime. So there were literally people going into like Walgreens or CVS with a calculator and racking up to $949 or whatever. And
in terms of what they stole.
Yeah. So that because they knew they weren't going to get charged, they wouldn't get charged, right?
And
what do you expect is going to happen when you do something like that?
Oh my
Of
God.
course, that's what they're going to do. These people are, they're governed by a different set of values than what you and I are governed by, or they're sick.
Right. So
they've got
they feel like they
reasons
need,
that they're doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or they feel like, like the man's out to get them, like they've been
Right.
held down for whatever reason, and society owes them. There's that too. I mean, there's all these
Yes.
different reasons why people do what they do. But the bottom line is the rest of us are having to be victims to this because of stupid policies like that. And, I look at
Gosh.
those people like Chesapeake and I mean, I don't know what drives him to think that way or why. I know he's Bill Ayers' adoptive son, and so clearly he was taught by people that had a different way of seeing the world
Hmm.
than a lot of us. But and I guess he's either a useful idiot who's he's literally believes he's doing the right thing and he's motivated, or he is part of the cabal, if you will. Like it's meant to bring down the community, the state,
Yes.
and certainly the people that supported him come from that um, mindset, I would say, from that motivation. I mean,
So how did you do this? How did you do your job? How could you do your job?
well, I mean, you go out each day and I mean,
What's
fortunately,
going to happen
honestly,
today?
fortunately for me, I was in the park district,
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah,
and
that's true.
fortunate or not so fortunate, the upside to that is a lot of times it was self-initiated type of
Hmm.
activity. There's a lot more self-initiated patrolling within that environment than there is in the city. Like for Oakland, for example, those guys and gals, when they come to work, they're like 20
Yeah.
calls down immediately. They're
Oh
chasing
my
a radio
gosh.
the whole day. They're just
Wow.
going for the next call that they're dispatched to. They're just completely responsive
Right.
and not proactive at all. So
Right.
they're not preventing, in other words, they're just responding to crimes that already occurred.
Okay.
Whereas when you're doing proactive policing, you're looking for crimes that are afoot, or I mean, let's be honest, there people aren't going to like it, but profiling is a part of being human, and it's certainly a part of being an effective police officer. You look for things that don't look right to you, right? Doesn't mean you condemn the person, doesn't mean that you go up and you treat them poorly or
Mhm.
disrespectfully, but it does mean that you take a closer look if you're actually going to do your job.
So we
Okay.
could even give it a name to profiling. Just
Proactive
looking, just
policing.
proactive policing.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but people want to say that, that
Right.
when you're doing something like this, that you're racist, or you're, you know, whatever reason that you're doing it to get somebody, as opposed to trying to, you know, to stop a crime from happening. So you look a little closer, and honestly, I found that to be very difficult, because I knew a lot of times I was going to find people that weren't doing anything wrong,
Mhm.
and I didn't want them to feel like they were being targeted.
Mhm.
But honestly, there are certain characteristics of different criminals with the way they carry themselves, their way their cars appear, and the way they dress, all that stuff. There's consistencies between those types of people and crime.
Mhm.
If you look at, and I'm not saying that there's not people that look completely like wearing a suit and
Mhm.
tie, and that they're not also they could also be committing crimes, but you're going to go after what stands out to you if
Mhm.
you're a proactive officer. I know that people might say, oh, that's wrong. Well, you know what? That's reality. That's reality. If you actually want your officers, stopping crime. And I by no means am condoning treating people poorly, or coming in with the preconceived notion of how this is going to turn out. But looking closely, but the whole playing the race card, you know, not that's just a form of not taking responsibility. That's all that is because a lot of the times, and depending on where you live, particular demographics, yeah, there's going to be a larger percentage of people of a particular race that are getting arrested. Well, they're also committing more of the crimes. Sorry, but it's the truth.
Mhm.
And so that kind of work that I just described has basically come to a halt. When I first started, that was very common. Not so much in state park, because they were already, they didn't want any trouble. type of thing. But regional parks, an actual police department. I described this before, but state parks is a resource agency with a law enforcement component, not an actual police department. So they're full-fledged police officers, but they don't necessarily have that. Well, they don't have that as their only mission. They're also there to teach, and I loved it because it was so well-rounded. But it's hard to be when you're doing law enforcement. To me, it's like you either do it or you don't.
Yeah.
And I found it really frustrating to be in a situation where they didn't want you really doing it the way you
Oh,
could be. Well, I mean, they were okay with you doing it, but only to a point. Right. Whereas when I went to the regional parks where they had an actual police department, especially with the first few years I was there, they were very proactive. They wanted you hunting. They wanted you stopping stuff from happening. They wanted you sending the message that don't come here and
right.
do
If you're going to do
your
this,
crap.
right.
No, yeah. If you're, and I so many times I had people, because car burglaries that was their most common crime.
Oh,
And I would come to take the report after the fact, and the people would tell me, I saw these people sitting there in their car, and my hair, I
something
knew,
felt
I felt like
wrong.
something
Or,
wasn't
yeah.
right, but I didn't want to be racist. So they just pretended like they didn't see it. They come back and their car's ravaged. And I'm not saying that well, I mean, can't base anything like that on. It's not only race that they were basing that on either. I mean, it was
Just a feeling.
it was a demographic breakdown, and the way, and a feeling, the energy that the people put out, certainly, and just the way they were, maybe furtively looking around. Why are they here? You're sitting in this beautiful, you know, parking lot somewhere where everybody else is here to go hiking, or just to enjoy. They don't seem to be even looking. They're not paying any attention to what's going on around them. Why are they here? Are they here to steal from the people around? Are they here to do drugs in the car? I mean, a lot of times, in an ideal world, that wouldn't be the case, but a lot of times that's exactly what they're there to do.
Oh my God. Can
you
you
know?
tell me, you had told me
So,
the other day about how when you would go into different areas about waving to people. Can you talk about that just a little bit,
yeah.
to the different types? I thought that was really interesting too.
Yeah. So, as an officer, I learned early on. I decided I was going to try to be a good ambassador, and most officers come in with that intention. But I also I made a point to acknowledge people, and wave at them or smile at them or something to engage them. Mostly wave. And when I was on the motorcycle, I would patrol the trails a lot, and I would make a point to wave at everybody. And in certain parts of the district, a disproportionate number of people would not wave back, and then instead they would give you a dirty look. And you would think, oh, it's probably people of like black people, because aren't blacks the people that that the cops are oppressing right now? Wouldn't Well, no, that wasn't the case at all. In fact, I found that the black population that I encountered, they were wonderful, friendly. They would wave back, even if they were they look rough around the edges. They'd still like give you a head bob or something to acknowledge that
To
you
acknowledge
acknowledge
you.
them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And but in the area that I think of the most, is the Oakland Hills, which is
Yeah.
actually, Oakland is, it's diverse as far as its population, but the Oakland Hills is mostly white. It's very affluent, and they were horrible, toward me. They were, I would acknowledge them and they would give me a dirty look back. And I think the reason for that is that quote unquote white guilt. They're buying the narrative that they were taught by the media, mostly, and pop culture, because they're going right in step with them. And they believe that the cops are out there doing this, and so they're going to do their part by showing their disapproval by being nasty. And the thing is, first off, I'm people might think I'm biased because I was a police officer, but the reality is that narrative is BS. Period. It's statistically been shown that it's not true. And actually, per stop, you have a better chance of being killed as a white person than you do as a black person by the police. You have a better chance. That's a statistic. But I'm just giving that as an example. And then I'm not hoping that anybody gets killed by the
Right.
police, but it's not like their cops are going out there and targeting people because of what they look like. But the bottom line is that you had a bunch of ignorant people that bought into a narrative that were just nasty. And I kept doing it. I kept waving because I just didn't want to give in. I didn't want to not be. Well, I didn't want to be. I wanted to still be that positive force, but there were
Right.
days.
Wow.
Where I just didn't have it in me, because when I waved and I got a dirty look back, I only had so many of those
Right. I
in
get
me
it.
for the day, because
Mm-hmm.
it bothered. It
Mm-hmm.
affected me. And I would try
Yes.
to say, put the shield around me, say, you're just waving, you're not, don't put any feeling into it. But then what's the point? They're going to feel that too, right? uh
Well, now
and
that you
and
are
so
so much into energy as well, so even putting that energy out there and getting that negative energy back, it can be tiring. It can be very tiring.
I'll give you a couple examples of things that happened to me.
Okay.
And so I this one time it was a dog. It was a dog contact,
Oh.
and it was on a resource protection area, very well signed resource protection area. Big area, probably the most rampant problems we had were on this trail. And so I would patrol, and I wouldn't give warnings unless they had a really good reason, unless that was really, because there's signs everywhere. I'm not, there's, if I give you a warning, you're just going to do it again. Not that I enjoyed writing them a ticket for that, but I was trying to be effective, and it was actually, when we started really enforcing it, it cut down on it a lot. But this guy that I encountered, he wrote he wrote in the signature section, like, he didn't want to sign the ticket, and then I said, you have to sign the ticket. You're not admitting guilt, but you're agreeing that you're going to take care of this. You can, if you want to fight it, you can.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to, you have to sign it now to acknowledge that you've been issued it and that you're going to take care of it. And he wrote in the signature line, "Cops kill black people."
Oh
And
no.
so yeah,
And was he a white dude?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so, I looked down on it, and I was
Oh.
like, I just looked down and said, "Oh no, sir, you actually have to sign it."
Okay.
And he did. He eventually did, but it was, I mean, that was
Oh.
in one of our Oakland Hills parks. And then let's see, another time I was this was kind of heartbreaking, actually. I came across this lady had a miniature horse that she was out on the trail with, on leash,
How
miniature horse.
that you don't see that every day, I'm guessing.
No, and there were
Okay.
all these little kids gathered around her, and I had to stop because I love animals, and I wanted to check this horse out, plus it's, I like little kids. So I'm interacting with this horse, and these the kids couldn't have been, they weren't any older than 5. Okay, and they were white, and they were with their moms were white, and they're coming up, and a lot of times they want to ask you about your weapons. They're curious about your gun, your taser, all this stuff, handcuffs. They're asking you about all these
Mhm.
tools. And so I'm talking to them, and 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 this little girl, she was so sweet, and she's talking to me and asking me all these genuine questions, and she says, "Do you kill black people?"
Oh no.
And I was like, I wanted to scream at her mom, because clearly she had been hearing this from the people around her. And and the part that was this was like orchestrated or something, because this is on a trail, like out,
Yeah.
not real far from the main area, but it's
Mhm.
on a, it's out in the middle of nature. It's not on
Right.
some busy part. And just as she asked me this question, a black man is walking by us,
Okay.
and he throws his head back and just starts bellow laughing,
No way.
yeah, like F you cop,
Oh, okay. Like, look at this little girl. She knows what she's talking about.
yeah, it was one of those. I mean, not, and I'm not saying that he clearly believed it, you
Okay.
know, um, and I'm not saying that he hasn't had some bad experiences with
Right.
the cops. He probably has, but doesn't mean that there's a systemic problem. You know, uh, there may be problems that need to be addressed within a particular area,
Right.
but that doesn't mean there's an overall systemic problem. There's a
So
big difference there.
what'd you do?
I told her, I said, no, no, I haven't. And, I hope I never will. And I can't remember if she asked me any other questions, but generally what I would tell kids when they asked me something like that was, well, no, they always want to know if you've ever shot anybody.
Oh,
they
shucks.
always, they always ask that question. And, I had to have my gun out quite a few times in my career, as most cops do. But, I never actually had to shoot anybody. And I would just tell them, you know, no, I haven't. And I hope I never do. I said, but if I do, it'll be to protect either myself or somebody else from being hurt really badly, you
Beautiful.
know, and which is the truth,
Right.
I mean, for a little kid, of course, that's what they're
Yeah.
gonna. When I was a little kid, I would have asked that same
I
question,
know.
right?
I know. And that's a
But
good question. Your reply was so well thought out, and man, I thank you so much for sharing some of this, because you really, again, we can hear about statistics of things, but you were on the front line. You experience things yourself, and you're such an enlightened being. So you're adding that to it as well, which is wonderful. And I do want to go into Tyson right after this, but I want to ask, so you were mandated, basically you would lose your job if you didn't get the vaccination. So what happened there?
well, when the vaccination first came out,
Yeah.
I had decided. Well, I was really on the fence about it, but I kind of just talking to my friends and some of the people in charge, um, that of the country that were encouraging people to do it, that I respected and trusted, or
Mhm.
that I believed that they were trying to do the right thing. I decided to go ahead and get it because, despite all the inconsistencies I was seeing, I did
Yeah.
believe that the COVID was a problem, and I knew people were actually dying. And I wasn't. I also know now that there was a lot to that too. That wasn't
Yes.
what it seemed. But I didn't want to end up being a statistic, and I didn't want to, leave my daughter behind unnecessarily, or my wife. So I decided to get it. And that was when it first became available, because I was a first responder, so I was one of the first that was able to get it. And not long after that, I realized that I'd made a mistake, and I just decided at that point, no way I'm getting a booster. I knew they're developing these boosters. I am not getting one. At that time, I didn't think that they were going to force boosters. Uh,
Did they?
you know, yeah, they did. So what ended up happening was with the booster was, I think the booster was available, and but our district decided to make the vaccines mandatory, and without any testing. Like, a lot of places had the option where you could take a test, and like once a week or twice a week, and that, instead of actually getting the vaccine. But our department was, nope, you either get it or you have an exemption. And people were getting denied the exemptions for the
I
medical
know
or
that's
for
so
religious reasons. And
unconstitutional. I
yeah,
believe that.
absolutely.
Oh
But
yeah.
but the whole thing, the whole thing was a house of cards. It was all a bunch of baloney.
Right.
But bottom line was, I had a job that they were going to take away. And what was I going to lose in the process if they did? But once they made it mandatory, I already had it. So I was covered, but I also knew at this point, I believed firmly that it was all a bunch of crap. I believed that the vaccine wasn't there to help us. And even if it wasn't doing that. And anybody could see that it wasn't really doing that. If you were actually willing to open your eyes and take your news from anybody besides MSNBC or somebody like that. And so I figured that what was going to happen next was that they were going to mandate the booster, because to me, it's like, well, why are they forcing the vaccines? Well, there's clearly an ulterior motive here. I'm not sure what it is, if it's just control or what, but they're going to keep going with this if they can. That's what I believed was going to happen. And so my wife and I both were like, oh shoot, we got to do something. We got to make a decision. This isn't, what they're going to, they're going to make the boosters mandatory. And, we had a home with the the Bay Area is very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
We had a mortgage and we needed both incomes. And we knew, and actually my wife's company had the same policy, ironically enough. I mean, given that wasn't necessarily the norm. And so we knew that if we didn't, if they made the booster mandatory, we were probably going to end up getting fired. That was what we believed.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like, okay, we're going to lose everything. We're going to lose our house. We're going to lose the whole 9 yards if we don't act.
Right.
And so that's when we started trying to find a place. There were police departments that were more, allowing people to test. But at this point I really didn't want to be a cop anymore. I felt like, going back to what you were saying before, when I went to work, I would, as much as I could, I would just respond to the radio. I wasn't really going and looking for stuff as much. I would only do enough to where it appeared that I was working.
Right, to get by.
And I was still probably doing a lot more than I've been told by people that in the department that knew what the statistics were. I was still doing a lot more than some of my coworkers, but yeah, I was trying to do enough to be relatively productive, but staying out of trouble at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And because it not only was it not accomplishing a whole lot, but if you get a complaint filed against you or anything like that, or heaven forbid you have to use force, or especially if you have to shoot somebody or something, or your life is going to change drastically. And is it worth it? No.
Right.
No. There was, when earlier in my career, there was some things that I did. I looked back, I was like, God, I can't believe it. I was fairly aggressive, when I was in certain situations,
Mm-hmm.
like dangerous situations. I had a more aggressive. That was my nature.
Yeah.
And they worked out fine, but I was driven, and when I was in the middle of those situations, I was driven by duty. I was willing to let my balls hang out there because I believed that what I was doing was making a difference, and that when that goes away, it's just, and it
it's
did,
pointless.
it went away. There's a lot of officers out there, I think, that well, not so much anymore, but there's a lot of officers that are out that love the job, partly because maybe they feel the duty. I think most all officers feel that duty, but a lot of them love the adrenaline. I wasn't one of those, to be honest with you. I would get a rush just like everybody else, and while I was in the thick of it, I liked it, but but I wasn't out there looking for the adrenaline rush, right? Because there's a lot of that comes with that, a lot of problems that can come with that. I wasn't interested, but if business needed to be taken care of, I was willing to do it. But once that goes away, it's like I don't want to have to do any of that, because it's not worth it. Even if I get the person, even put myself on the line and get this person for whatever they did, probably not going to be worth it. The juice isn't going to be worth the squeeze, And so anyway, I didn't, because of all that, I just, I felt each day I was just going and passing the time and trying to get through it. And that was the
That's
don't
no
get me wrong.
life.
No, it was really, it was
Right.
very,
It's
it was
horrible.
hard. It was hard for the spirit. It killed it.
Yes.
It kind of killed. It had a hard impact on my spirit. I loved. Fortunately, I was on a motorcycle, so I
So
loved
that was
riding.
good.
I liked being on the motorcycle and being out in nature, and all those things were good. But you still want to feel like what you're doing is making
Yes.
a difference.
Okay. So
And
let's use
that you're
that
useful.
to transition into Tyson. So we're going to spend just a small amount of time on this, but yet all of this coordinates together. And you can probably feel from Brandon or see, it's got a great heart and imagining that. Let me ask you one more question quickly. Most people on the force with you or your compadres, your coworkers, were they a lot like you? Nice, would you say?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, some officers, I have kind of a more, I guess you could say, open. Just
Yeah.
my way my energy and my personality is, I'm more open and friendly, and I that was my style. Unless I was in a serious situation where I weren't needed to put on
Right.
the hard officer, which it calls for that sometimes.
Yes.
Most of the time, no, though I was friendly with people, and there were officers that had a more stern approach, which is the way they would approach people. But that was them. That was their personality. That was what they had to work with, right?
Right.
But them as humans, as what they were there for, why they were doing what they were doing, um yeah, they were good people. I mean,
Yes.
and there's officers that, like any other population, work
They're not so
population,
great.
there were people that
Right.
I worked with that I thought were assholes, actually.
Mhm.
But even they weren't out there trying to hurt people.
Right.
They weren't my cup of tea, and in some cases I would even say, and very few I would say were actually kind of an asshole.
Okay, but they
But
weren't out there killing Black people or killing people in
no,
general.
no, not hurting. They
Okay.
weren't trying to hurt anybody.
Right.
They were just
Yeah.
trying to, they were trying to do their thing. I'm not saying there aren't cops out there that have done that.
Exactly.
Certainly there have been, but that's such a small,
Small
small,
percentage.
small percentage to it's goofy to it really is goofy, and it makes no sense to demonize a whole population like that, because
Mhm.
honestly, in terms of quality of people, in terms of integrity, I think you're going to find a higher percentage wise per capita of high integrity people in the law enforcement profession than you will in most any profession. And
That
I
is
think,
really nice to hear. I mean, wow, what a
I'm
statement.
not saying they're perfect. They're human just like everybody else, but what drives them to get into it, they
Mhm.
most of them
To
want to
help
make a
people.
difference. And frankly, to become a cop, especially if you're a little older and you've had some life experience and
Yeah.
you've done things just to get through the vetting process, you have to be a pretty upstanding person in order to even get the job. Honestly, to become in today's world, to
Yeah.
become the president of the United States versus becoming a cop is way harder in terms of having to have a clean background and
Oh,
that sort of thing. It's the truth, or
is
any
an awesome
politician for
statement.
that matter. It's the
Whoa.
truth. Yeah.
Okay, listen to that, people. This is again from someone who knows, who's been in it.
Mm.
Let's take you to Tyson because we're not going to be able to talk about that long, but that's key as well. So, Tyson, I'm going to paraphrase some stuff. Your little 8-pound dog that passed away from a brain tumor. Essentially, you guys were so connected, so connected. His death, tell me if I'm saying this right, Brandon, drove you in a sense to find out your spiritual connection with him. So upon your third medium or psychic, the first two were like, didn't really feel
Animal
anything. But
communicators.
yes,
Yeah.
animal communicators. The third one blew you away. Like she knew specific things that no, and she brought in other members of your family, didn't she? Not only just pet, but, or was that the fourth
But
person you went
she
to?
didn't. Yeah, that was the fourth person. But she did know about, she channeled Tyson, but she knew information about Tyson's relationship with other family members,
Okay.
which was pretty cool.
So would you say,
Specifically, my wife and daughter.
uh,
Mm.
so that within itself opened you more up to And how did you even, I think you even went to someone, you were like skeptical, like, okay, I'll just go. And then you ended up doing your second and third person were scheduled at the same time. And then when this all started clicking, was that the part of you that went, oh my gosh, there's so much more to our
Yeah,
world?
I mean that first in the third animal communicator session I had with Sandy Casca, who's in Iowa City, Iowa. You know, I had my session was over the phone with her. I was in California.
Mhm.
That session was like that was the first major ice breakage for me. And I
Mhm.
was like the chink in the armor, like, oh wow. I because it was clear that something was afoot. I I wouldn't say that I was 100% convinced. I remember I told her, I think you made a believer out of me because it was so compelling, but I still had to process it and integrate it, and I still had the skepticism to deal with. So I wouldn't say that I was 100% convinced after that, but I was very compelled,
Mhm.
and I thought my if I had had to bet my life at that moment, I probably would have bet that it was real. And in fact, I know I would have. I would have bet that it was real, but there was still a lot of misgivings inside that I was coping with. As most people can relate to that. But when I went to the fourth one, which wasn't an animal communicator, she was a spirit medium. She does animal communication, but she connects with all past loved ones.
Yes.
Uh, and she's really powerful. Named Lisa Silverman. Uh, and she
Was she
channeled.
the one that was a lawyer as well? Or she had, or
No, that was
interior
that was
designer?
that was Sandy. Sandy, the
Okay.
animal communicator, was the yeah, she was the attorney. Yeah, so Lisa was the interior designer, and she channeled several of my family members and Tyson, and it was so powerful. It was 2 hours of just
Ooh,
nonstop information, and it when I left in the book in Tyson's Gift, I call that chapter "Coffee with Loved Ones" because it was literally like sitting down, and like if I felt like I'd walked into, because I didn't know who I was gonna
mhm,
was gonna come through. In fact, the people that came through were not on my radar.
mhm.
Uh, I'll just my uncle came through, my grandma came through, my aunt came through, and Tyson came through. Obviously, I wanted Tyson, but there were other family members that had died more recently that I was more at that they were more of a that I wanted to talk to. I was not that these I wasn't happy to talk to them because I was ecstatic, but my grandma died when I was 16. My uncle died when I was 16 also,
Got it.
and my aunt had died like 10 years before. And so it was like, they weren't on my radar.
Right.
It wasn't something that I thought if anybody's going to come through, it's going to be, this person and that's why I was hoping would come through, and they didn't. And so these other people came through. So it was like walking into a coffee shop and unexpectedly finding your loved one sitting there waiting for you, and having coffee with them and chatting for a couple hours. That's what it felt like when I was done. It was that their information was that personal and real, and the
Mhm.
energy felt that authentic, and it was just really, really powerful. And that's when I was like, oh my God, this is real. This is very real. It's
Yes.
I've been steered down this path for a reason. I really did feel that too throughout all this, is that this awakening that's occurring is for a reason. And for a really good reason, a beautiful reason. And so I felt the desire and the drive to go further and find out more, not just about the concepts of spirituality, but try to grow in my own metaphysical abilities and my connectedness to all that. So that's when I learned Reiki. Reiki was the first major thing that I did, besides meditating. And then that I found that really the energy healing has always been very natural for me and resonated really well. And so I've just gone deeper and deeper into the energy healing since then. So I love it. It's good stuff.
Awesome. So what I meant to ask you before, so I'm going to ask you now, do you communicate with Tyson, or Tyson at this point was the impetus for all of this opening
Uh,
for you and new discoveries, spiritual discoveries?
I still, well, I communicate with them daily, but I can't go into details about that because it's in the book. And you'd have to read it to find out what,
Gotcha. Good plug.
but it isn't what you would expect. Let's put it that way. But yeah,
Oh, lovely.
and it's interesting. Well, yeah, I've had a number of people tell me, like you said, that he seemed to be bouncing around behind me.
Hmm.
So I know on an energetic level, his higher self is still definitely around me.
Oh, yeah. And he's so excited. He's so
Yeah,
excited that you're doing this. Loves it.
well, and it's a bit, Tyson had a healthy ego in a good way.
Good point.
Now,
That totally makes sense too.
I mean, he's a lover. I mean, he's an absolute lover, but he also, I think he likes the fact that, that he's being made to be, super
A
dog,
little, yeah, he loves
little
it.
super dog.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, cause he was and is, uh, but yeah, so I think he's around me definitely on a spiritual level, but there's more to it than that. Yeah. And I
Understood.
don't want to give it away because I want people to enjoy the book more.
Right, exactly. All right. So I'm going to include also your websites, tysonsgift.com and tysonsgifthealing.com. And I'll include, especially on the video, a PDF of the book. In terms of your own work, you do remote, face to face? Where are you at this point?
Yeah, I do it all. I do. I live in Tallahassee, Florida. So a lot of my clients are, and I just started the business in April. So a lot of my clients are out in California,
Mhm.
or in people that I knew that I was already close friends with that or live in other parts of the country. So the vast majority of work that I do is distance, but I also do in person. I've got a couple clients here in Tallahassee that I work with too in person. And but I've had just as much luck with the, or not luck, but um uh positive results with the distance versus
Mhm.
the in person. And I do, which the other thing that I do, there's the color and sound, the spiritual assisted healing technique, which is kind of the way I do it is kind of like Reiki, but instead of Reiki energy, it's actual spirit doctors that I'm channeling that are doing the
Mhm.
work,
Nice.
which is they're awesome. They're a talented group. They've done great things for my clients. But another technique that I just recently learned, light energization is amazing. As you're pulling the Kundalini light, that's a very loving energy, and it's not, it's more about boosting people's spirit. And I mean, it has healing properties too, but it's more about pulling that Kundalini energy up through their spirit. And it's very powerful, and it's a very loving energy. But the one that I've been working with, it's quite a bit too, is that I haven't put on my website yet because I learned it and I've been practicing it in making sure that I can really do it effectively. I
Mhm.
don't know. I always question that until I prove it to myself. There's no reason. I've been just as good at it from the start, but I'm proving it to
I
myself. It's
get
called
it.
reflective etheric healing. And what it is there's your etheric body are broken. There's 4 layers to your etheric body.
Mhm.
There's the chemical layer, the life layer, come going from your physical up. Your chemical layer, your life layer, your sensate layer, your light layer, and your reflective layer. Well, within your reflective layer is the blueprint for your physical body. Your etheric body is an exact duplicate of your physical body comes from your etheric body. It's not the other way around. But within your etheric body, within your reflective layer of your etheric body is this blueprint. So if you have a different body parts that may have issues, you can literally replace that body part with, you can regenerate it with that blueprint and implant it back into the physical body. And I've done this I've done,
Oh,
and I've had several effective clients, or effective cases. I've only done it with a handful of people so far, but they've all, with the exception of my dad, who, and the only reason it didn't work with him was because he was in his head. He was having a hard time, he wasn't sure he should be even doing it at the time. But I think now he's actually talked to some of the people that I've worked on, and now he wants me to do it again. So So
Well, and I
I'll
tell
be,
clients too, it's not just about me. You have to be doing the work too.
yeah,
Like
well,
someone's like, I can help you, but yeah, you got to be in it.
yeah, and well, and it's in this particular technique, it's even more so because the person actually participates.
Mhm.
That there's some chance that you do.
Okay.
Now, when I say chance, I shouldn't,
Or
they're more like
mantras or
mantras that you repeat a couple
yes.
of times. And I mean, they're not real, all blah, you're not speaking in tongues or anything like that, but you just, the statements that you make that are more setting a strong, robust intention towards
Intention, exactly.
what you're doing. So the client definitely participates. But it's really, it's remarkable how effective it is. So, and I've been doing it. What's interesting is that when I learned it, because the practitioner goes into the etheric body, it
Mhm.
physically goes into the etheric body. And so my question was, because with these other distance techniques, you are working with the person's body,
Mhm.
but you're doing that through, energetically, and you're doing that with spirit guides, right, that are helping you. So in this particular case, the question was, can you do this from a distance, because you're actually going into the etheric body? Well, my thing was, well, if you employ the help of your spirit doctors and spirit guides, why wouldn't you be able to do
Yeah,
it?
exactly.
What's the difference? But my instructor
Exactly.
was like, he told me he wasn't 100% sure. I guess he hadn't experimented with it. I mean, this guy's powerful, and
Right.
I just don't think he had worked with it. But he told me maybe. And so I was like, he didn't say no. He said maybe. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to start trying it. And
Right.
so, and it's worked.
Of
Distance
course,
wise,
because aren't
it
we all
worked.
collective consciousness and all one? And
But
what I,
I think
yes.
his concern was whether, because the practitioner is physically,
Oh,
I mean, because like when you move your hands, like you have to kind of come in light and from the side into the
right.
etheric body when you're in person. That's to the degree that you're working with the etheric
Mhm.
body. So are you going to be able to manipulate somebody's etheric from a distance? But the answer is, I believe at
Yes.
this point,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, because
So
when I
it's
work with clients remotely, I talk about like I do a lot of body work hands on as well. So if there's someone remote, I'm like, I tell them a lot of times I'm taking my right hand and putting it on your heart and they feel it, the
mhm.
same kind of thing. Like you're just right there. I'm going to add that potentially Brandon and Todd, who is on another episode, are going to become this trifecta little mastermind. So I want to put that out there right now, that we're going to end up, because I having a partnership for me in terms of this bigger spiritual work is neat with you being in Florida and Todd being where's Todd again? Not Utah, or is he
Or
in
is
Utah? He's in
he
Oregon.
his home where his family lives is in
Oh,
Utah, but he
okay.
lives
He's in Oregon.
his body is his employment is in Oregon, and it's because he makes a lot more money working there than he does in Utah.
Oh
That's
my
the
gosh.
reason. So
Okay.
hopefully
So
he can put an end to that sometime soon.
yes. Okay. Slipstream Shaman, a couple episodes back. Brandon, I'm going to go ahead and close this out right now. I'm going to include everything. Thank you again so much for sharing
Welcome.
your human aspect, the policing aspect, the California experience, and then this healing. And you talking about it at the end really shows how you've stepped in it deep, not just Reiki, which again, to me, everybody can do Reiki in a sense. It's a little they're doing it in
It's
hospitals
fantastic.
now. So it's
Yeah.
becoming much more mainstream. And then you ended it talking about things that aren't as mainstream, which I love saying that Reiki is mainstream. That just
Yeah.
blows me away too.
Well, and it's such a great starting point.
Yes, it
And
is.
not that it's not powerful,
It is
because
powerful.
it is,
Hmm.
but it's a place, like for me, if I didn't hadn't have had Reiki as
Opening.
a technique to grow into,
Hmm.
I wasn't ready for what I'm doing
Right.
now. I wasn't even
Right.
ready to grasp it, intellectually or emotionally or spiritually. My level of skepticism, at least for me, was too high at that point to accept the things I'm doing now. Whereas Reiki, because it has become more mainstream,
Hmm.
because regular folks that I knew were doing it,
Yes.
it kind of it quieted that voice in my head. So if you're somebody out there that's
Uh,
kind of mesmerized by this, or it's piquing your curiosity, do yourself a favor and learn Reiki and try it. And it doesn't take a lot to learn the first level. I mean, it's my Reiki one was 2 days, 2 8-hour days, but a lot of them, they combined Reiki 1 and 2 in that time. So it's not like a big time investment. It's more the
Or
investment
financial.
comes. Yeah. It's not
Usually
like
it's pretty,
it's reasonably, I mean, it's a chunk of change, but it's not like huge or anything. It's not like, it shouldn't be a deterrent.
When I got my
And
first 2 done for free at a church.
really?
Yes.
Well, I'm sure you can find something like that. I had to pay a little more than that.
Yes. And
But
even
the
Reiki
thing is,
sharing and all that.
but it's there for you. And once you have that attunement and you learn it, it's all just about working with it, and it really helps you to open up. And so if you're just starting, and I only got into this in 2018, so I'm twice removed
He's a
from where
newbie.
you're at. I am a newbie.
He's a newbie. And let me add,
at least in this life. In this life.
There you go. And let me add on to that, the attunement, to me, if that is all you get out of it, that just on a spiritual level, it just opens you up and makes your energy more fluid. So just do it to be attuned and take all the rest and go, oh, this is really great as well. Oh, okay. Anything else? Of course, there's a lot else, but are we good to go?
Yeah. Well, I'll just say,
for now.
Have me on again. And I'd love to come on. Great conversation.
Yes. All right. This is awesome, Brandon. Thank you so much. All right. Hang in there. I'm going to stop recording. See y'all later.
See ya.
Bye. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.
Okay, we're back because Brandon and I were talking offline, and he's got something juicy to share. So go ahead.
So I was just a part when you were asking me about, what things made you, that jumped out at you about the COVID response in California, the Bay Area, whatever, my police department, that made me raise my eyebrows and get me suspicious that this isn't what they think, what they're saying it is. So we, once they did implement the masking policy, first they were the cloth masks, and a lot of them actually were being made by hand by people and given as gifts, just because we didn't have access to them. Which obviously the cloth mask didn't do spit. But they gave us gaiters, and that was one of the options they gave us. They gave us regular N95 masks. They gave us the surgical masks if we wanted them. They gave us gaiters, and gaiters they're like a light kind of neoprene-ish. They're not neoprene, but they've got that kind of like silky, like sweat material, that people wear around their neck to keep their neck warm. And you can pull it up over your face to keep your face warm.
Okay.
And so it's, makes a mask, right? So so I was sitting, myself and a couple other officers were in the at the time that I was working in the special enforcement unit. We had a trailer right at the department, and I think there were 3 of us in this trailer, and we're in there doing paperwork, and one of the sergeants walks in, and he sees we're not wearing the mask, and he says, "You guys are killing me." And it wasn't that he was upset with us, because he didn't think he thought it was crap too, but he didn't want us to get in trouble. And he didn't want to hear about it from his superiors. And so knowing that he's only saying that because he has to, and he's trying to protect us, I pulled the gaiter up over my face, and completely over my eyes and everything.
Gosh. Okay.
And mind you, you could see through it. This was a department issued mask that you could see through.
Oh,
okay.
Gracious.
That's how effective it was.
Okay.
And I think at some point they stopped allowing the gaiters, but for up till I think right before I left the department, those gaiters were issued and encouraged. Right? So I lift the gaiter up, put the gaiter up over my face, and I say, "Okay, I tell you what, you give me the bird, and I'll tell you exactly when it comes up." And meaning that I can see right through this damn thing.
Yeah.
And he just started laughing. And he says, "I'm just trying to keep you guys out of trouble." And I know, but that's an illustration. Give me a break. It was all for show. And I did wear it when I was out with the public, because,
and I'm sure with that, you looked, I mean, I would imagine that looks kind of fearsome. Having I'm assuming it was black too, or it matched the uniforms, or.
Yeah, blue. The one I wore was
Okay.
blue,
But no,
but
that's
yeah, but I mean, I
pretty
wouldn't say it
intense.
looked fearsome, but it put people's mind at rest. Oh,
Oh,
he's
okay.
wearing he's wearing a mask,
He's got his gator on. All right.
so it's all good.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that could, I
You
could
could
spit through
totally
the
see.
thing.
All right, man. Thanks for
Is
the
it-
addendum.
No, you bet. I just felt like that needed to be put in there.
It needed to be said. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Just be practice.
It is so interesting how all of these podcasts are going. With Brandon, him telling you the truth and giving you statistics, but because he was a police officer, it just isn't some random dude saying, "Oh, what about this?" Like, he was there, he lived it. So this work, when I started this, it's not about being a journalist, but it is kind of becoming more of that way, which is really interesting. Like, I minored in that in college, and then, I wanted to do radio, and I did radio not very well when I was in high school. So it's so cool how everything is coming around. So I want to focus this practice, and we're going to do a meditation this time, on the truth, because as I continue doing each of these episodes and meeting different people and really honing in my intention for what this podcast is about delivering truth. And the people, like with Brandon, again, being a police officer, but also now coming into Reiki. And so my job is to also find people that are very connected to the heart as well. So not just, I'm just giving you this truth because this is what I believe, but no, I've been there. And I'm also really working on this great awakening that's coming and opening up into the glory and the pristine power that is here. And I wouldn't be on this podcast if she didn't see something in me, some truth, something, some sparkle, something. Okay. So with that, close our eyes or get comfortable. Close mine for a second. And I'm feeling like there's going to be this arrow of truth that hits you right in between the eyes, which that is exactly, the pineal gland is deep in there, but the third eye kind of see it right there. So this truth arrow is just going to come in and not going to be hurtful, yet it's going to be beautifully piercing, beautifully, like there's nothing holding it back, that it just comes in and just okay, this might sound graphic, but kind of like sticks in your forehead. And then they're just these lightning bolts of fluidity that just come in after it. Okay. So this is where we're going to go. All right. So back. I know I say all right a lot. I'm trying to diminish that as much. This arrow, it's really like a beautiful crystalline lightning bolt too, dancing around. I see it in front of our faces, wanting to be invited in, yet taking its time, being very polite, because once we invite it, it's going to charge in beautifully. All right, so for me, I'm going to invite it in, and I'll encourage you when you're ready. Okay, for me, it's permeated. Only light. And I'm going to ask specifically that only light and only truth. It's almost like a filter comes through this, keeps my discernment. Yet, it's only truth. Okay, that's really interesting. All right, and see if there are any colors that are there with yours, and just say only light right now. White light. No emotions getting in the way, nothing getting in the way, only truth. And this arrow lightning bolt, when we finish this, it's going to act like a conduit for you. And if we set the intention right now that this is so good for me, this is really going to help guide me, and help clear out all of that other stuff. And this is also going to register with my heart and connect with my heart. Oh, well, here's where we're going. I'm seeing another arrow or another bolt that is dancing around right here in front of my chest, your chest, also wanting to permeate into the heart, asking for permission. So for me, I'll go, yes. Again, white, light. Let's keep rolling. I'm seeing one now dancing around the solar plexus, intuition, wanting to be invited in. I'm going to say yes. And then feeling the same thing on the back. And I feel starting with the solar plexus first, then the heart, then the back of the head. I'm seeing energy, electricity, connecting, all of them. Oh, well, here's where this is going. And then a bolt shooting out the crown chakra, the top of your head, and a bolt also shooting out your root chakra. This is electrifying, vibrationally high. And for me specifically, and you can ask this too, once this is in place, this doesn't leave. And it only aids not only truth in words, but truth in feeling, truth in foods, truth in whatever there is, purchasing something, to minuscule things, to big things, making decisions, that this is going to help give you clarity in everything. Wow, this is kind of special. So wherever you are, come out of it, or come into awareness of what is in front of you. When you're ready, take a calming breath and see how you feel. Okay, and just carry that with you. And again, see how you feel and how you react to things in the coming days. See if anything seems different. Okay. I want to say that's it, but holy smokes. A lot of times I don't know what's going to happen at this point in time and what's going to come. Bye. So cool of you to be here. I went from being off most social media to being on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Truth Social, and you might be watching this on YouTube, Rumble, or BitChute. Or you might be listening to this on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. I'm on over 19 directories at this point. So connect, comment, subscribe, like. Oh, and my intention is to have a new episode out Wednesday of each week. Oh, Lordy, more to come.